and welcome to Scotty Kilmer Live Car Talk Podcast, where I use my 51 years experience of fixing cars to answer all your car questions. I'm here to help everybody out. Notice there's no advertisements, nobody's paying me. I'm telling you what I've learned in 51 years. So if you got a question you need answered about your car, just put it in the live chat. I pick the best ones and I answer them. First question is Michael Martin. Michael says, hey, Scotty, what's the deal with these oil change shops? You go in for an oil change and before you leave, they tell you need an air filter, transmission fluid, new oil pan gasket, etc. Okay, it's called capitalism. I remember when I was a kid and we were going to New York. My father was going to play bridge and I was riding with him to hang out in New York City. And we were going on New York State Thruway. So he goes in those days it was full service gasoline. They filled your car up. Well, you go in, fill it up. The kid tells my father, you need a new air filter. And my father, who ran his own gas station, said, hey, kid, I just put a new one in before we took the trip to New York City. You're full of shit. And that was that. The kid got paid like 50 cents for every air filter sold. It's the same thing that you're going to find here. People are just selling you things that you don't necessarily need. They're told to do it. They get a percentage cut. You need to check all that stuff yourself. Look at it and then you know. If it's dirty, change it. If it's something that is old from mileage or years, put it in a little notebook in your glove box. And then you know when you really need it changed. Don't trust people that sell things. They're never going to tell you the truth. Next question is Alex Bachman. Scotty, my wife's 2012 Honda Civic EX has a check charging system light. We have had several mechanics check the alternator, starter, battery, and a general charging system. Each mechanic said all the systems were fine. What could this be? Okay, realize that you got a 2012 Honda. The charging system in that car is ultimately run by the main computer. And a lot of times that is a problem, and that's what it does. It'll give you that warning. Now, if you find a guy like me that will honestly put his gauges on your car while you watch, and if he checks the battery with it, and then checks the alternator, and if he says the battery's good and the alternator's charging fine, just ignore it. But if he says, no, it's not charging right, it could easily be a problem in the computer or the wiring coming from the computer. I see that a lot in Hondas as they age because they're so complicated. They're making things too complicated. Instead of having a little mechanical voltage regulator to regulate the voltage, they now do a computer that controls the whole thing. And of course, when it breaks, then you got to buy a computer that costs over $1,000. So more planned obsolescence on the way. Next question. Big Josh says, Scotty, if you had to choose, what would you choose between a supercharged or a turbocharged and why? Oh, I'd choose a supercharger because a supercharger can be turned on and off at will. They're generally belt driven, but you can get electric ones too that have electric motors on them. And you can turn them on and off when you want. So if you want a lot of power, you can flip it on, and you don't, you can just leave it off. A turbocharger runs off your exhaust gas, so it has to be all plumbed into the exhaust, and then you have to have all new computer software put in and special sensors and a wastegate and really expensive stuff. It costs a lot more money to put on a turbocharger than a supercharger. And a supercharger, hey, it's easier to do. You can turn it on and off at will. Where the turbocharger, hey, they're almost all computer controlled. They cost a lot of money. And if you want to add power, the reason that most cars come turbocharged is because theoretically turbocharging is more efficient. So when you rate them on the rating system on the dynamometer, the gas mileage ratings are a little bit higher. In the real world, no. If you get a super or a turbocharged car and you step on the gas, you're spinning it fast, you're revving the engine up higher, you're going to get terrible gas mileage. It's only if you drive them slow. And who puts that on a car and drives it slow, you know? Next question. Lakeside Oats says, Scotty, I'm thinking about getting a 2002 Oldsmobile Alero with 163,000 miles on it. Should I go ahead? Okay, that's a reasonable amount of mileage. If you're not paying much, go ahead. They can be okay vehicles. They're not great, but they're not terrible. If it's got that 3800 V6 GM engine, those are really strong engines. If you get it cheap enough and it runs okay, Why not? But don't pay much. It's not worth much. You know, it's a 17-year-old GM car. Its value is practically nothing. If you can get it cheap enough and it runs okay, go ahead. You're going to hear some humming. They're putting stucco on the house behind me, so they're putting all that chicken wire on. It's cheap modern construction. Next question. Everett York. Alan E.S. says, Scotty, what do you think about weird electrical gremlins in older cars? I have an '04 Ranger that only blows AC out of the defrost vents and nowhere else. No heat either. Okay. All that stuff. It may be old, but it's modern enough. '04. What happens is your HVAC system, the heating, venting, and air conditioning, that's all run by computers. And you're now stuck in the default, which is defrost. When the system breaks, it goes to defrost and stays there. It's a safety thing, so that when the winter, your windows won't fog up and you can't see or kill yourself. It's not a bad idea, really. But you have a problem in that system. No one knows. It's usually the control unit goes bad and then it won't switch them back and forth anymore. But you're going to have to find a guy like me that has a dealer level scan tool to do bidirectional testing to see, is this working? Are the actuators working? And you can't do that without one of those computers. It's a very complex system. Next question. Christopher Gallibert says, Scotty, I'm looking to purchase a classic car, Datsun 240Z. I live on the East Coast and a lot on the West Coast. Do you think it's worth the risk of purchasing it from California? Yeah, if you want one that isn't rusted out, those 240Zs were killer cars. And they're simpler cars, too, because the 240Z had carburetors on it. It's not fuel injected. You can fix that stuff easily yourself. And there's many parts readily available. And if you get a car from California that's actually been there the whole time and the frame isn't rotten, you can't go wrong. The car's not going to rust. And if you're going to bring it to New York, my advice is put it up in the winter when the salt's on the road and only drive it in the summer, because you don't want to ruin a classic car like that if you get a good one and fix it up. And they are worth money. They're classic cars and people really like those things. They're pretty well made. Like I said, you can still get parts of those things pretty readily. Next question. Sam I Am says, hey Scotty, I just got my first manual transmission car. Should I change the manual transmission fluid? If so much, how should I remove and add? Okay, manual transmissions are only splash lubrication. There's gears inside, and the oil inside just splashes around and lubricates them. It's not like an automatic transmission that has a pump inside that pumps the fluid and it shifts by fluid pressure. All it is splash lubrication. But that said, it's a good idea to change the fluid every 80,000 miles or so. Now, manual transmissions are easy. The drain plug, you on, take it out, and all the fluid drains out. Then you put that plug back in, and then above it somewhere, there's an add plug, and you unscrew that, and you pump new fluid in there until it comes out that hole. They're very easy to do. Every 80, 90,000 miles, change the fluid. It'll make them last longer. Next question. Eagle Arms USA says, Scotty, would you recommend replacing the lifters that are ticking on a 1988 Bronco 2 or to get something else? People are starting to collect those old Broncos. And lifters aren't all that expensive, If it's in vehicles in good shape otherwise and really doesn't burn a lot of oil, there isn't a clunker that's all worn out, heck, I'd do it. Old things that can run a long time, and they're simple. Plus, since it's a classic Ford design, there's always parts available for those things. It's not like you got something that you can't get parts for anymore. There's parts that are ready available for those things. And if you don't mind the relatively poor gas mileage that thing gets, for you, I'd go ahead and fix it. Next question. Cooper Sport GB says, hey Scotty, what's your opinion on classic minis? Oh, I love the classic minis. The classic minis, I'm not talking about these modern ones that BMW is making in England. I'm talking about the classic ones. Post-World War II, the English wanted a small, reliable car. And they came up with the minis there, the Morris garages, a front-wheel drive, cute little vehicle that was cheap, that could run for a long time, take up a tiny space. I think they had little 8-inch wheels or something. and not that slow. I mean, they could zip around. They had no top end. I guess they went 68, 70 or something tops. They didn't go that fast. But they're very interesting cars. It was the first real mass produced front wheel drive car. And they sold millions of those things. They're a long way away from the modern minis. The modern minis are BMW design. They cost too much. They break down when they get older. They have electrical failure problems. Their automatic transmissions are garbage. The standards are okay. But I like those old classic minis. I think those are neat cars. My neighbor's from England. She had one. She was in England. She still dreams about it. She loved that car. Next question. Jesus Kiddo says, I have a 2010 Toyota Camry. Has a flashing AC light. The AC works a couple minutes, shuts off. The relay and the AC controls have been changed. What do you think's wrong? Okay, it's probably the AC compressor clutch is going out. If you're low on refrigerant, they'll do that. And if the clutch is going out, they'll do that. And they had problems with some of the clutches on those. As they wear out, the electromagnetic field breaks down, and then it shorts out, and then that light starts flashing. Now, make sure that it's full of refrigerant, because if it's low on refrigerant, it can do the same thing. But if it's full of refrigerant, you already changed the relay, odds are that the compressor clutch will start torn out. And if you want to try just the clutch, you can bolt the clutch on it without having to take the compressor off the vehicle and knock all the gas out and then refill it, which is a real pain in the butt. Next question. Kai says, hey, Scotty, what's your opinion on the all-new 2019 Toyota Corolla hatchback? Is it reliable as the older models? Well, only time will tell. It's 2019, right? It's still 2018 here, but, in June they start calling them 2019, so, it's this year's new one. I personally never believe in buying a new model of anything because you never know if they're going to have bugs or not. Now, seeing the history of Toyota and Corollas, they never really made any giant mistakes, so I imagine they'd probably be pretty good vehicles. But personally, myself, I only buy things that have been tried and proven over the years, and I'm cheap as can be. So I'm never going to buy a new car. Why would I pay even $20,000 for a brand new car when I can get them when they're 7, 8 years old with 50, 60,000 miles for $4,000 or $5,000, and they still have 80% of their value? If I can buy a car for 10 to 20% of what its original price was and still have 80% of its lifespan in it, I'm all in, and that's all I've done my entire life, and that's all I'm going to continue to do. Next question. Nicholas Freelander says, what do you think about Koenigsegg Regera transmissionless drivetrain? Okay, Koenigsegg, the guy's a genius. There's no doubting that. What, he makes the fastest car in the world. You got $2-3 million to throw out, why not buy a couple of them? What the? He's got very interesting technology. He pushes the edge. And yeah, that's a fascinating design, I gotta say. It's very interesting. That said, stuff like that isn't going to be in normal cars for quite some time, if ever. He's dealing with cutting edge technology. And yeah, I find it fascinating. I love watching shows about it. I love to meet the guy. Hey, if somebody wants to fly me to Sweden, I'd gladly go. My wife like to go too. She could meet some of her old relatives or something in Sweden. But he's an interesting guy. He has some very interesting designs, too. Next question. SoCal Uber Dude says, do hybrids really save you gas? Well, yes, they do, because they regenerate electricity. But you got to understand under what conditions they do that. If you drive on the highway, a hybrid doesn't do anything except give you extra power, because when you're driving 60 miles an hour, say in a Toyota Prius, it is running 100% on the gasoline Atkinson cycle engine. So if you had another car like a tiny little Corolla, you can get pretty close to the same gas mileage going on the highway, 55, 60 miles an hour. But when you get in stop and go traffic, some of those things can get 50, 60 miles a gallon, because when you stop, it regenerates the electricity with the braking system. that goes into the giant battery, and then the car can run on the electric motor. So they do save you on gas if you do a lot of stop and go driving. I noticed the last time I was in Seattle, every Uber driver that I used from the airport to the hotel I was staying at was driving a Toyota Prius. And they do it because they save a lot on gas and their rides are cheaper. It was a long way from the airport to downtown Seattle, and it cost me 24 bucks because the guy said, "Hey, I only used, 3/4 of a gallon of gasoline, so it only cost me $2 in gasoline." So they do actually work for getting better gas mileage. As to whether you recoup the investment or what you pay extra, generally you're not unless you're running a business. Next question. Christopher Gelabert says, Scotty, how risky is it to buy cars across country or internationally? Well, of course, anything's a risk if you can't personally put your hands on it and see. I mean, a few years back, a company wanted me to talk about their auction setup. So they gave me a truck, a pickup truck, and it looked okay. Of course, they only show you a few pictures. And it was a Toyota, and it only had 110,000 miles, which is nothing for one of those. So they sent it over here and a tow truck, and then they dropped it off, and I pull it in the driveway, and I crawl under it, and the frame's all rotten. And, if I would have paid money for that, I would have been furious, but they gave it to me for free. So, who's going to kick a gift horse in the mouth? But I had to re-weld frame stuff. It was a pain in the butt. I gave it to my son. He's still driving it, so I did a good job fixing it. But it's real risky buying things that you can't personally see. I mean, it's just a gigantic risk, especially if you're going internationally. Now, if you're using a company like eBay and stuff, though, a lot of times they got a pretty good guarantee that if it's not as they said it was, eBay holds the money in escrow, and they'll give you your money back. A lot of times that's not a bad way if you're dealing with a company like that will give you your money back if it wasn't as advertised. But it's always a big gamble buying something like that. Always. There's no question in that. Next question. Art says, hey, Scotty, I just bought a 67 Dodge Dart sedan. Any opinions on darts? It starts up, but it dies as I'm driving. Do you have any idea what the problem could be? Okay. Those are cool old cars. The new Dodge Darts are a joke. They're not a Dodge Dart. They're some kind of funky Fiat with Fiat engines and transmissions. They're pieces of junk. The people have class action suits against Chrysler for them. They're horrible cars. But those old ones are cool. Now, since you say yours starts up and it dies when you're driving, it's old as the hill. And the odds are your gas tank is all rusted and you're either going to have to clean it out or replace it. What you want to do is take the fuel filter out. And if you see there's rust particles in it, go get another gas tank for it. Because once rust starts, rust particles are real small and tiny. And the filters can't even filter it all out. And then they'll start clogging up your carburetor. And you'll have to keep taking it apart and putting it together. I did that when I was a kid. The first car I ever had was an Opel. It had a rusty gas tank, but I was cheap. I wasn't going to buy a gas tank. So I kept changing the filters, and every couple of months, I'd just take the carburetor apart, and then I'd clean the rust out and put it back together again. I mean, I was really cheap. And I drove it years that way, but most people ain't going to do that these days. It's too much headaches for them. Next question. The slide says, Scotty, what do you think about an Alfa GT 2006? Okay, Alfa Romeo is a fantastically interesting company. They make zippy sports cars. They have interesting technology. But that said, their value plummets like a lead balloon the minute you buy them. And here in the United States, it's hard to get parts for them. They're hellacious cars to work on. They're fun to drive. I'll get that. Whenever I work on one, I love driving around. They're fun to drive, but they're endless money pits. But that said, you can buy a used one dirt cheap. And if you want a cute sports car for a toy to drive around on Saturday and Sundays, and you get it dirt cheap and it's low enough mileage, go ahead, you can have some fun with it. Because they have no resale value at all in the United States. They're worth nothing. And that one's 13 years old. It's got no value whatsoever. Next question. Evangelist Sergeant Cobby Boat says, I got an '05 Rendezvous and got a new battery Sunday and connected it. 3 days after I looked at the cars telling me it has a battery problem. What's the problem? Wiring, alternator problem? Okay, realize most Good auto parts stores like AutoZone, they will load test your batteries and your alternators free in the parking lot. So just drive over to one of them. Now check it. Odds are you just need another alternator. Now, if you don't need an alternator, then you have what's called a parasitic drain. Something is draining your battery while it's just sitting there. And if that's the case, watch my video, how to fix battery drain on your car. It'll show you how you can all test it yourself. It's pretty easy stuff to test. You get a drain, then you start checking where the drain is by pulling fuses. When the test light goes out, you know it's in that area, and then find where the short is. But it's probably just the alternator. And like I say, any auto parts store will check it for free and tell you. Next question. Xavier Serrano says, Scotty, what do you think about a 1998 Honda Civic manual transmission with 165,000 miles? Will it last a while? I've seen some of those with 350,000 miles on them. Honda was originally a motorcycle company. And what do motorcycles have? Standard transmissions. They make excellent standard transmissions. Their cars have excellent standard transmissions. Their automatic transmissions, they're kind of iffy. They never were that good. But their standard transmissions, they are killer. And since it's an older one, it's 21 years old, you can probably pick it up for a song and a dance, and it might last for a really long time. And there's still parts readily available for Hondas. Next question. Junior Zorro 3000 says, Scotty, I have a 97 Jeep Grand Cherokee V8. The transmission ships life after 3,000 RPMs in first and second, but just fine after that. What could be wrong? Old age, the thing's 22 years old. Needs to be rebuilt if you want it to run like it normally did when it started out. But here's something that I've tried with the Jeeps, and it often works pretty good on the old ones, is drain 1 quart of fluid out of your transmission and put 1 quart of that Lucas automatic transmission additive, and then drive it about 250 miles. And if you find after that it's just fine, great, it's helped it out. If not, you can just live with it, because you're going to have to rebuild the transmission to fix that, and that costs so much money you might not want to do that. And they can often go that way for years and still go down the road. Next question. Corey the Fam says, Scotty, I got a 95 Chevy Silverado. My temperature gauge doesn't work. I changed the coolant sensor and didn't fix it. Any thoughts? Okay. There's only 3 things that really go wrong. Either the sensor's bad, or the wiring going into the dash is bad, or the dash unit is bad. On yours, check the wiring, but it's probably the dash unit is bad. Now, dashes cost a fortune. You go to a junkyard and probably buy a used one cheap enough. You could just swap it out yourself. They just snap in and out. It's a simple job. You can do it in half an hour. Or, if you want a real temperature gauge, go to any speed shop. They got plenty of stuff for that. You can buy a sending unit, the wire, and a little unit that you can bolt on the top of your dash, like a race car, and that'll have a temperature gauge that works fine. A lot of guys will do that and bypass all that stuff. Spirit Walker 79 said, would changing synthetic oil more often even further the life of an engine? Well, yes, if you're going too far, like some of these fools buy this mobile one that says, oh, you can change your oil every 20,000 miles, and you change every 20,000 miles. It certainly would make it last longer. But let's say if you buy synthetic oil, and let's say you're changing it every 7,000, 8,000 miles. Don't waste your money. Just change it every 7, 8. Don't change it more frequently, because it's still going to hold up pretty well after that mileage. Realize you still got to change the stuff once a year regardless, because all oil gets contaminated being in an engine. There's always some blow by from the piston rings, and there's buildup of moisture and acids and stuff. So you still got to change the stuff once a year anyways. Next question. Osvaldo D. says, Scotty, I replaced the throttle position sensor with an aftermarket on my 96 Tacoma and lost performance. Okay. Never use aftermarket sensors on Toyotas. Go original equipment. You don't have to buy them at the dealer. There's lots of other places that sell OEM stuff for them, but you got to use OEM on those. And that said, too, follow the directions. and make sure that the throttle position sensor's in the right place, because in a lot of those they have a slot and they can be adjusted. And if yours is one of those, you got to get the directions, you got to follow them to a T. Some of them will say hook an ohm meter here, turn it until it does a certain thing, then lock it in place. You got to make sure it's set in there correctly and only use OEM. A lot of those Chinese aftermarket ones, they're junk. You don't want to buy them. I've tried to save customers years ago money with them, and then they all bit me in the rear end. It didn't work right, so I'll never do that again myself. I learned from my mistakes. Next question. Smoke too much, a Scotty. For VW E888 engines, do you think getting rid of the EGR system and letting crankcase exhaust gas be directly into the atmosphere is a good idea to avoid carbon buildup? Cheers from China. Love you. Oh, you're in China. Now, if they don't have any inspection laws, yeah, they run better without them. There's no arguing that. I mean, when I was a kid, they started putting those EGR things, and the guys deleted them. They'd take the valve off, and they put a little steel plate over the hole so you wouldn't do it. And yeah, it's an anti-pollution thing mainly to get unburned, to get gas go into the engine that's already been burnt, so it's more inert. So your catalytic converter doesn't overheat and create oxides of nitrates. That's the reason that they make them. So you don't care about pollution, you take it off, yeah, the engine will run better and last longer. I don't know if you're breaking any laws in China. You'd be breaking a law in the United States, but I don't know if you'd be breaking a law in China. Next question. Dealer Kurbanov says, Scotty, what's better, Toyota Highlander 2011 or a Mazda CX-9 2016? Oh, the Highlander by 4. I've got customers with those things that have over 550,000 miles on them. Those things can run forever. They're well made. They get decent gas mileage for a vehicle that's that size. They really much better than the Mazdas. The Mazdas are okay if you buy them brand new. I'm working on one right now. It's got 40,000 miles, and it's fun to drive around. I got to admit, it's zippy. It goes around. But I know when they get old, they have problems, and they start to fall apart. And then goodbye all your money, and you try to sell them. Nobody wants them. Next question. Elliot Hollifield says, Scotty, what about buying a 2013 Ford Fiesta with over 55,000 miles on it? Well, if you get it cheap enough, they generally have pretty low resale value. If you can get it cheap enough, they're not the greatest of cars. They tend to fall apart when they get 100-something thousand miles on it. But if it's only got 55 and you get it cheap enough, go ahead. But if some fool's trying to sell it for like $10,000, $12,000, go to the next one, because that thing isn't worth much. It's a 6-year-old Ford Fiesta, and the values plummet quick. And they're not going to be making them anymore, too, so it'll be, don't pay much for a car they're not going to be making anymore. That's only common sense. Next question. Broccoli says, Scotty, how do you feel about used 4.6 liter Mustangs? Okay, well, the 4.6 liter engine was a very strong block and heads. There's a lot of work could be done on it to make it go. So they're strong engines. But you're talking about buying a used Mustang. Depends who you're buying it from. Now, if you're buying it from Grandpa who got it, or a middle-aged guy like me that, they just had middle-aged crazies and they wanted a Mustang and they didn't beat it up, not a bad idea. But if you're talking about buying one from a young kid who was doing burnouts and drove it like a maniac and you see a lot of wreck damage on it, run away. Because a lot of guys buy those and beat the heck out of them. Before you put any money on a vehicle like that, you'd want to pay a guy like me to check it out, a professional mechanic. Because our scan tools, they tell us so much info, and we can see how the engine's running just by looking at the live data, hundreds of pages of it. We can scan through it, and our really good scan tools are great for scanning because it isn't naked data. It's green data, yellow data, and red data. Green meaning good, yellow meaning it's in between, and red meaning bad. So we can find problems real fast. Next question. Urban Exploring says, Scotty, how do you feel about those Japanese Mitsubishi mini trucks that are imported? Well, they weren't bad trucks, you know. They could run a long time. The thing is, they weren't as reliable as the Toyotas. But if you're talking about getting a used one, they're a lot cheaper than the Toyotas too. Toyotas have insanely high resale value. I've had customers buy those uh, Mitsubishi mini trucks, and they paid like 1/10 of what a Toyota mini truck of the same year would go for. So heck, if you can get them, they run okay. Why not? You know, nothing wrong with doing that. Next question. Trevor Phillips says, Scotty got '08 Crown Vic police car. It has 240,000 miles on it. I take good care. I don't know if the transmission fluid has been changed. It looks pink. Should I change it? No, leave it alone. When an American vehicle has that many miles on it, if you change the fluid, it might start slipping. They shift by fluid dynamics. Your old fluid's been in there a long time, could have a lot more friction in it, and that could be what's making it go. You put in new slippery fluid. I've seen guys do that, and the transmission starts to slip. If it's still working out, just leave it alone. It's old. You're tempting fate anyway, so don't tempt it more than you have to. Well, that's it for this week. Remember, every day of the week I put a video up on the Scotty Kilmer channel on YouTube, so subscribe and ring the bell. You click on that notifications bell and you'll be notified every time I put up a video. And I'm here every Thursday at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube live answering your questions, and Saturday at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. So I'll catch you then.